Yeah, the events of January 6, 2021 have become high holy days for the Democrat Party, used to rob you of liberty and try and silence their political opposition. And ever since then, they've orchestrated a variety of stunts at taxpayer expense to keep it in the news, including the January 6th committee put together by Nancy Pelosi, where she banished any Republican selections to join the committee to help vet the events of that date. So since then, Republicans have launched an investigation of their own into the January 6th committee itself to take a look at, well, how did they do all of this? And of course, by now, you know, they deleted so much evidence. They didn't share everything they knew. They were hiding things from the public. And that brings us to today, a hearing conducted, the Subcommittee on Oversight today of the House Administration Committee. And it was entitled 3 Years Later, D.C. National Guard Whistleblowers Speak Out on January 6th Delay. And among them were Colonel Earl Matthews, the chief legal advisor for the D.C. Army National Guard, Command Sergeant Major Michael Brooks, senior enlisted officer, D.C. Army National Guard, Captain Timothy Nick, aide-de-camp, D.C. Army National Guard, and Brigadier General Aaron Dean, the adjutant general for the D.C. Army National Guard. And here is some testimony today from Command Sergeant Major Michael F. Brooks. Here's what he had to say. We'll just play a little bit of it, and then we'll introduce our guest. Here we go.
I will not sit here today and say if we had been given authority to immediately respond when Chief Sun, the chief of the Capitol Police, made that first frantic call for support at 1:49 p.m., that we would have prevented the breach of the Capitol. What I can tell you with absolute certainty is that we had a force equipped and ready to respond. And that despite the inaccuracies of the DOD-IG report, we had a plan and would have liked the opportunity to try. Instead, we waited for hours, knowing our Capitol had been breached and not understanding why we had not received the authorization to respond. I cannot tell you the number of times someone has asked me, where were you? Where was the National Guard? Or how can you call yourselves Capitol Guardians? There is no easy response to those questions, and the truth is, we were there and we were ready. We just weren't authorized to respond, and that is difficult to explain.
The critical detail, who held them up? Joining us now is the man who made the phone call asking for their help, former United States Capitol Police Chief and author of Courage Under Fire. His name's Stephen Sun. Chief Sun, good to have you back with us, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me on, Vince.
So give us a sense, if you will. You know, this gets complicated, I think, but the core questions are, why did the National Guard get delayed? Why weren't they there in the first place? We've heard, many times that President Trump had actually offered National Guard support to the Capitol ahead of January 6th, but why weren't they there?
So I'll go ahead and answer this question. I'll tell you, I attended the hearing today. I come from a military family. I have the utmost respect for the men and women in the military. I don't hold a grudge against them. I've worked with the D.C. National Guard numerous times. I've deployed them numerous times for IMF World Banks, for inaugurations when I was with D.C. Police, and I know their capability. But I'll tell you, the four people you read off, Brooks, Dean, Nix, Matthews, the level of credibility and honesty is unmatched with those guys. So I'll tell you this. So why the delay? That's a really good question. There's a process set up for when civil authorities call for the National Guard, whether it's DC or any of the National Guard. It's a civil defense support for civil authorities,
right.
DISCA for short, because everything has to have an acronym. And there's a process. Well, the problem that we run into is the process should have been clearer. I call for assistance with General Walker. This is a life and death assistance. It falls under emergency authority. He should have immediately been able to deploy. However, you have a lot of dispute on whether or not there was a call from President Trump to have 10,000 troops ready, or whether he pushed them out ahead of time or anything like that. But January 4th, you have Acting Secretary of Defense Miller put out a memo putting unprecedented restrictions on the National Guard to respond to civil unrest, to carry any chemical munitions for riot control, to even wear helmets, to carry ballistic shields, or conduct any law enforcement activity. So, and that's written directives. So I'm putting in these calls. Well, first of all, let's combine both these. What was the delay? So first of all, I requested the National Guard twice on January 3rd, Sunday, January 3rd. I'm the only chief by law to US 1970 that has to go and get approval from the Sergeant at Arms, Capitol Police Board, and the leadership of Congress to bring them in. I was denied twice on Sunday, January 3rd. So we come into January 6th. I don't have the resources I need.
Just remind me, by whom? Who are you denied by?
So I'm denied by both the House and Senate Sergeant at Arms. The first one is the House Sergeant at Arms, Paul Irving. He says he is concerned about the optics of the National Guard on the Hill, which is the exact same thing Lieutenant General Piott said when I'm on the phone call with him on the 6th. Doesn't like the look of the optics of the National Guard on the Hill. And I think that kind of echoes what his boss, Speaker Pelosi, had said during the 2020 protests when you had National Guard and you had federal agents on the streets of America. She referred to them as stormtroopers. So I think he was really scared to have them deployed up there. He denies me, sends me over to the chairman of the Capitol Police Board, Michael Stinger, and Michael Stinger won't approve him because Mr. Irving's not approving him. So I get denied twice requesting National Guard assistance. So coming into January 6th, I don't have that assistance. Even when I start requesting that assistance at 12:58 p.m., I still get delayed by Mr. Irving for 71 minutes. So it's at 1:49. They referenced the 1:49 call during the testimony. I went ahead and called before I even had approval because, my men and women really needed the assistance. So at 1:49, I call, and now they're delayed because of that memo that came out January 4th. Colonel Matthews is trying to run it up. I'm sorry. The Colonel of the National Guard. Sorry.
That's okay.
William Walker. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm getting mixed up. So Colonel Walker is trying to run it up the chain to get approval because now he has a written memo. The policy says he has the authority to deploy them, but now that policy has been overwritten by the written memo from the Secretary of Defense. So he's trying to get approval, running it up the chain. That approval doesn't come for 3 hours and 19 minutes. Even though I'm on the call with the Pentagon begging for assistance, I'm trying to bring in, every law enforcement I can, but repeatedly I'm asking for assistance of the National Guard, and they're not coming. Think about it. The New Jersey State Police came to my aid before the D.C. National Guard did, and many were within eyesight of the Capitol. So, so that's why the delay. I think it's because of the memo. Why they wrote the memo, I still don't understand. Was it, after there's some discussion with the president on Sunday, January 3rd? I don't know. Why weren't they there in the first place? I kind of answered that question.
Yeah. So let me ask about someone else here, just to make sure I have this. Yep. There was also, as I recall, an effort by Muriel Bowser to prevent a National Guard presence at the Capitol. Is that right?
So it's interesting. There's so many different aspects to this. So right around January, I think she wrote her memo, January 4th or 5th, saying that under no circumstances does she want any additional federal resources deployed in the city without full knowledge of the Metropolitan Police Department and I believe even the Office of the Mayor. So, you got these series of memos coming out that are all going to the Secretary of Defense, either coming from them or going to them.
Yes.
I think that one went to Esper, but anyway, went to Rosen, the U.S. Attorney at the time. But needless to say, you've got Muriel Bowser's memo coming out. I think that all played a role in the reluctance of the Secretary of Defense to go ahead and pull the trigger and deploy the National Guard.
So as a matter of fact, the National Guard was delayed in getting to the Capitol. That's just true.
100%.
They were stopped.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, while we were under attack, there was 180 with all their gear, like I said, within half a mile of the Capitol, and they didn't move for 3 hours and 19 minutes.
Insane. Okay, so now let me bring you to more testimony, because there was Congressman Barry Loudermilk who's been leading this investigation. He puts another question to Command Sergeant Major Michael Brooks, again, senior enlisted officer with the D.C. Army National Guard, about the delay. And here is how Michael Brooks and then subsequently Colonel Earl Matthews attribute the cause of that. Take a listen.
The DoD IG report alleges that DoD officials did not delay or obstruct a response to the Capitol. Sergeant Major Brooks, I'll start with you. Do you believe that the deployment of the D.C. National Guard was delayed?
Yes.
Who do you believe delayed it?
Secretary McCarthy and senior officials in the Army staff.
Okay. Why do you believe that they delayed it?
I believe their misunderstanding of the capabilities of D.C. National Guard and the seriousness of the situation, to be honestly, I have no idea why we never received that order. All I know is that they were more concerned with what it would look like with soldiers with the Capitol in the background than protecting the Capitol of the United States.
Colonel Matthews, same question for you. Do you believe that deployment of the D.C. National Guard was delayed?
Yes, sir. I believe that it was a result of an overcautious, reluctant, hesitant, facilitating leadership. And I think they were concerned about the optics, the political optics of a military presence here. And I don't think they trusted the commander-in-chief. And I think that was because of our senior-ranking military officer who was making disparaging remarks about the president to them.
They didn't trust the commander-in-chief. In other words, the Pentagon, the DOD, did not trust the commander-in-chief. This is the belief of Colonel Matthews. And so, therefore, they didn't deploy the National Guard. In other words, if you don't trust the commander-in-chief, what you're saying is you're being insubordinate.
Very much sounds like that. And it sounds like, you have a number of people. You have McCarthy. He doesn't even come to my command center, and that's where we should have been coordinating this response. He instead goes over to MPD's command center. Now it turns out he is allegedly trying to line up some type of, support for Mayor Hauser.
Yes.
Get him some type of political position in the upcoming Biden administration. And then you have these concerns that I think he's referring to Mark Miller, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and some of the disparaging remarks he had been making about President Trump.
Yes. Yeah, and his assurances to China that he would give them a heads up if we ever were to launch an attack on them. Don't worry. It's things like this. Yeah, Milley by that point was thoroughly out of control. And so what you are hearing here from National Guard soldiers is that, the DOD delayed this because they were concerned about the political optics and they didn't trust the commander-in-chief. That's a wild place for a country to find itself in.
It is. It is a very scary place. And even think about it, just shortly before we have the fatal shooting inside the Capitol, I'm on the phone with the Pentagon. I'm literally begging Lieutenant General Piat to send me resources. And his response to me, and I'll never forget it, is, my recommendation is not to support your request. I'm dumbfounded over that to this day. And to hear that from a military commander while the Capitol's, having the issue that we're having. I think a lot of people just were stumbling over their own feet.
It's so bizarre. I've had a longstanding theory, and I think I'm not sure if you agree, so I'll ask. Which is, I think Nancy Pelosi was under the impression that that there was going to be some sort of left-wing violence or something at the Capitol. It's because the pattern in the United States through 2020 was a tremendous amount of left-wing violence in our streets. And she had become so conditioned to saying, don't put it down, let it breathe, let it go, that was her attitude leading up to the events of January 6th. Do you think there's a chance that's the case?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know about that one. I'd have to ponder that one for a little bit.
Okay.
I think, I don't know if there was some anticipation of some type of violence. I don't know what intel she knew.
Well, do you think that?
I think that'd be helpful, and I'm hoping.
Do you think that they wanted to let the riot go because they could use it as a political cudgel against the right?
I've had a lot of people make that recommendation. What do you think of this thought? I'll leave it at, just put it with this. The fact that I asked twice in advance on January 3rd, I'm denied. And I'm denied, just thinking about this, for 71 minutes while that battle's going on. I'm denied by both sergeant at arms because they're waiting for, allegedly to run it up the chain, and the chain is going up to Speaker Pelosi for 71 minutes while that battle's going on. They delay me. And literally after just within minutes of being approved, that's when they broke the first one that would get into the Capitol. It doesn't take a lot for someone to start to go down that rabbit hole that maybe, they wanted to see something, but I don't know. I think that's a tough one.
So
I don't know.
Let me one more question for you, and thank you very much for your time today. Again, we're talking to Stephen Son, former United States Capitol Police Chief, especially during the events of January 6th. Sir, the left has made a routine characterization of that day as an insurrection. They use this word all the time. It's an insurrection. Is that how you view it from your perspective, having led the U.S. Capitol Police that day?
So I will tell you this. I'm kind of a rule of law type of guy. I think that the law should apply equally to everybody. And my thing is, when you look at the 2020, you brought it before the 2020 protests and the riots and what went on down at the let's take a look at the White House.
Yes.
You had 3 days of attack on the White House. White House operations were completely shut down. The first family had to evacuate into a nuclear bunker. You want to call the Capitol an insurrection, then let's call the White House. I mean, that was as much an insurrection as the Capitol, if not more, with the 3 days of riots. And then you have the politicization of, a law enforcement agency, the DC police, formed by Congress for the protection of the president, and they're not even allowed to go to his aid. There's a lot of problems there. So I think if you're going to call one an insurrection, you need to call them both. So that's kind of my opinion.
All right. Former United States Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund, also the author of Courage Under Fire, with a perspective today on that big National Guard hearing in Congress. So many lies being exposed. Thank you very much for your time, sir. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Good. Take care.